All right, 8:26 West Coast time gaming morning show continues, and we are proud and thankful to welcome in Kate Sánchez from But Why Though podcast joining us on the show. Good morning, Kate. Thanks for taking time to spend a moment with Look, It's Maiko and myself on the show and talk about all the amazing work that I've found you doing, plus the most anticipated games of 2021. I know you shuffled a ton of stuff around to be able to join us this morning, so I can't say thank you enough. Let's start with just kind of an overlook of what But Why Though is, because I want to make sure we introduce everyone to the work that you're doing. Give us an idea of But Why Though and why we should check it out.
So But Why Though is an entertainment website. We cover literally everything in pop culture. So video games, TV, film, anime, manga, books, comic books. We do interviews, recaps, reviews, news, all of the stuff under the pop culture sun. We do it. But the extra cool thing about us is our main goal as an outlet is to make sure that we are uplifting marginalized voices within the respective entertainment industries. So we really push towards one, having a diverse team that covers everything, but at the same time, building an inclusive community and space for everybody to come and join and really get to experience this, because fandom is large and sometimes very scary. We want to be here to make it a little less scary.
Well, and what I found interesting too, Kate, is I look at your website and I understand that this started out as a podcast, and as your community
Yes.
grew, so did But Why Though? Why was it important for you to expand the reach, now having this website, so many contributors? Kind of give us an idea of how that happened.
I was actually in a PhD program, and that PhD program was awful, so I left it. But I also really like teaching, researching, all that kind of stuff. So as I was going out the door, I started the podcast with my husband and one of our really good friends. And then after maybe about a year doing that, we I got the itch to write again. And I was talking to my husband. I was like, hey, I'd kind of been putting up blogs and stuff on the domain that we had owned. And I was like, do you think we could maybe turn this into a website? Because like people like what we talk about, and people, want to get other people's opinions. And he was like, we could try. And so we put out a call for writers from our podcast account, from our listeners, and a lot of our first round of writers, some of which are still with us, were initial listeners to our podcast. And from there, we realized that we could really not give a voice, because they have voices, but elevate voices around us. Because as we began working in we started in games, and then we kind of expanded, we realized that a lot of the coverage isn't from people with from marginalized backgrounds. And we're not just a site that does that. Like, we have everybody at our site, but we wanted to give people a space and a platform to share their opinions on media, whether that was through official channels and doing reviews with screeners and codes, or if it was writing features on films and how they impacted them positively, negatively, all of those things. We realized that was really lacking in a lot of spaces. And so we just wanted to do that. And now, almost 3 years later, we're still not 3 years old yet, but almost 3 years later, we're here. We're working in multiple industries, and my main goal as editor-in-chief is really to make sure that I'm empowering everybody around me to get opportunities and to kind of pursue their passions in pop culture. So
Kate Sánchez joining us on Gaming Morning Show. I'm gonna let Mike take the second question of this, because the moment in time, the reason we had you on was this most anticipated games of 2021. Those are the kind of things that we wanted to hear from at the beginning of the year. You were kind enough to say, hey, I'll squeeze you in Friday, which I love. And so you have this list of 10 games. Let's try to narrow down maybe 2 that you just absolutely think people have to get, and why they made your list.
So that list is actually from all of us at But Why Though. So the way it works when we do our end of year roundups and our most anticipated is we essentially take ranked lists from everybody, and then we give them point values, assign them on, get stuff up. But for me, My most anticipated was really Halo Infinite and Resident Evil Village, but more so Resident Evil Village. Like honestly, that's kind of the only game I've had on my brain since the announcement for it. Because I'm a huge Resident Evil fan. I like to say that two franchises shaped who I am as a gamer, and that's Tomb Raider and Resident Evil. So anytime that there's new content from Capcom on my favorite series, I'm automatically excited, and I love gothic horror, so that's kind of where I am. And then from a Halo perspective, my husband really loves Halo a whole bunch, and I got really into it with a couple of my friends. I got into Halo 3 a lot when that first came out. In 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 the world where everybody thought they were a major league gamer, me and my friends had our clan, and we had set up nights to competitively play. And so I'm really excited to get back into that, but more so I'm really excited to experience Halo with my husband because we game together. I mean, obviously we both run a pop culture site together, but like a lot of the game reviews we both do for the site are from the co-op and multiplayer side. So I'm really excited to get to experience a new Halo with him. So that one's more of like a sentimental piece, and the other one's like, just give me Resident Evil, Capcom, please. I'm tired of remakes.
Now, along the lines of the Halo Infinite thing, though, how do you feel about the whole kind of announcement? They're going to slow it down a little bit and make sure that they do it right. Do you feel like that's the better way to go as opposed to maybe the cyberpunk way, where we just kind of put it out there and then hope for the best and maybe no one notices?
That's 100% the best way to go because it will keep you on the store. um, I there if there's one thing I don't like being misled on products that I'm buying. I don't like it when I buy a game and then surprise you're playing another character that you totally didn't know was there and you didn't buy it for. On the same side, I like to play a game that doesn't have that many bugs on launch, especially when it's the title that's supposed to make your console. And to Cyberpunk's piece, like just being upfront, like, hey guys, this is not as good as it needs to be. We just need to push this off, versus the extremely deceptive route, which was Cyberpunk did, which was we're only going to give PC codes to people, and those will be the only reviews live on embargo and the only people with any time to do anything by launch. And then we'll give people console codes and then we can get into it. And I just being upfront about it, like, I don't know, there's that quote that always floats around, like, everybody remembers a bad game, like when it launches, like,
Yeah.
and successful comebacks from horrible launches are what, like No Man's Sky, Final Fantasy. But that's a lot of work, and that
Yeah.
is rebuilding your entire product from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
Now
So
you have a master's in cultural anthropology and religious studies,
yes.
and this is in your bio. You talk about focusing on how pop culture impacts us. By the way, we have a whole bunch of people in chat saying Resident Evil, like our buddy Nintendo Nerd saying, like, Resident Evil, absolutely. I've seen some Halos in there too, so you had a lot of agreement with our chat. When it comes to, the focus of how pop culture impacts us, what do you find the most fascinating in that regard of how pop culture impacts people?
So my master's thesis and my early dissertation work before I left was focused on how, specifically on comic books. So it was on how stereotypes and the usage of American Muslim identity in comic books impacts how people view Muslims per the times that they came out. So my largest piece, and I had a whole plan to expand that into different areas for different groups, but like when we consume media, and this is the reason why representation is so important, is when we consume media, especially when you're a place where you're not familiar with people who don't look like you, what you see in film, what you read in comics, what you play in video games, that becomes canon to you because that is your only exposure to that. So while I really think pop culture is cool and how we construct our sense of self, and how we identify ourselves as a weeb, as a Trekkie, like all those things, I think that it's more fascinating in how pop culture taps into the way we build conceptions of other people that we've never even met, because we internalize fictionalized characters in a way that impacts us both to see ourselves but also how to see other people. And so that's what's always been my most fascinating thing. It's also why But Why Though we really try to make sure that media that involves a specific topic is reviewed by somebody of that background if we can. That's not It's really hard to do when you're such a small website like us, because we don't really have we don't have a budget really. It should be easier for places like IGN. But so that's one of the important things, and that's always been the most fascinating thing for me about pop culture.
And the way that I found you was in an attempt to make sure that I listen to as many voices as I can on my timeline. I found you through Latinx in Gaming seminar that you did about community building, and that was one thing we wanted to focus on Gaming Morning Show, was to make sure that we bring in a variety of voices. Hopefully, as our platform gets bigger, also an opportunity to amplify voices, which is exactly kind of what you're talking about with representation in the stuff that you're doing. Until we get to that point, we're going to continue to send people your way. You have been absolutely a shining star on my Twitter timeline. You've been so kind. You've been very wise, and I appreciate you taking the time to join us. This is one of those interviews, Kate, that we could have easily be an hour. We have 10 minutes in the format that we do, but we'll certainly invite you back at some point, because we want to do some longer form interviews that we're going to put out at some point. But until we get to that, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today on Gaming Morning Show.
Thank you so much.